What's on your mind? What's on your mind?
Yeah, before we get into other topics, I was just thinking that. Okay, let me start over.
No, this is staying in. Go on.
Oh, okay. So, in the last couple episodes, I think that if people have listened or watched them, like, wait, what's wrong with me? Okay, let me actually just start over from here because I just
Okay.
I'm
Go
trying
on.
to, I'm just I hadn't really thought through just like my random thoughts, but
Self-referentiality like this is terrible. You just gotta live in the moment, man. Go on.
exactly. Well, yeah, some people are worried that I'm going through an existential crisis. They've listened to
Some.
the last many
Some
people
of
are
us,
saying.
many people are saying.
Yeah, so actually one of my favorite novelists, Zia Haider Rahman, who is a listener, he made some references. He loved the episode that we did with Rachel Rizzo,
Yeah.
but he did make a comment that it seems like Shadi is going through some kind of existential crisis about something or another.
He called it an
And
existential spiral.
oh, spiral.
He
Oh,
said,
wow. Oh,
Shadi
goodness.
going down an existential spiral. Must watch. I agree with that. I agree with all of that. Go on.
Fascinating. Yeah, so what just got me thinking that I do have a tendency to kind of experiment with and explore ideas that are personal to me publicly. And maybe then, like, instead of going to a therapist, like who needs therapy when you have a podcast? Like
Let me just say before you go on the podcast thing, but I've always felt who needs therapy if you have good friends. But go
Oh,
on.
even better.
Yeah.
Well, this is a podcast that I do with my good friends, so I suppose that it's not too different. And but anyway, I don't really think I'm going through an existential spiral, but we can save. Well, anyway.
We don't have to save it. Look, here's the thing. I haven't yet listened to your other podcast, the podcast you're cheating on me with, the Zealots at the Gate. The one, but it seems I saw you were on your most recent episode. You were talking about again part of that existential crisis, or at least the tuning out of politics thing, which is I think at least to me the most outward facing part of your existential crisis. Right? Is that fair?
I just think it's a change in behavior.
Yeah.
I don't think there's anything to get worried about. If it's just about me ignoring the news, I don't think anyone should be like that. It might be a cry for help, and maybe some people want me to follow the news and they're hurt by the prospect of me not engaging in kind of daily debates about like dumb political topics.
Yeah.
But I don't think anyone should be fearful for my soul or anything like that. But okay, so also just as some little background, last night I spoke on a panel that this organization called Braver Angels was hosting on the future of the left. And it struck
Not
me
the
that
band.
it was, yeah, not the band. And it struck me as somewhat odd that I would be invited to kind of speak from within the left. But and I guess I have been thinking more about whether or not I can still, like, if other people don't think I'm on the left, maybe I just have to respect their viewpoint. Or if other people don't think that I'm even center left, because I violate core tenets of the new kind of left-leaning liberal faith, I do wonder to what extent do we prioritize what other people think about our political identity, or do we prioritize our own self-identification? Because I think I'm living my truth. I think that I believe that I am center-left. Just like if someone believes that well, I guess you can't really believe that you're another ethnicity, although maybe actually some people do that now. But
we had many eruptions of that during the woke thing, right? A lot of people passing as persons of color to get jobs. So I think you can believe that.
True,
Yeah.
true.
But
And,
go on.
If you can choose your
Religion?
sexual or gender orientation, why can't you choose your political orientation?
Do you choose that? I don't know. Is that the orthodoxy now that you can choose it, or that isn't the repression thesis tied to the fact that like your truth is being repressed?
Wait, I guess I just mean that people can decide or choose or self-identify as or as like non-binary or queer, trans, and so forth. I mean, there's a number of different self-identifications, and you're supposed to respect people's own personal self-identification. There was a new one that I heard actually last night when I was talking to some of the youth afterwards, and I did make an effort. I mean, some of them weren't happy with what I said, but I wanted to hear them out, so I held court a little bit, and it was almost like a listening tour, like a listening experiment where Shadi, the increasingly old, perhaps reactionary person, is listening to the youth. And I heard a word I hadn't heard before, agender. So a and then gender, which I don't know exactly what that means. And then I was asking them, like, I wanted them to help me understand how they view white privilege. They were all around like 22 or something like that. And I don't talk to 22-year-olds all that often. And it does really strike me that there is a generational gap or divide. But anyway, but it makes me think that, so is it normal to be in the middle of your life and to start feeling that key political presumptions are changing? That used to happen a lot during the Cold War, where you had people who started off as socialists and communists, and then over time they became neoconservatives. So that was actually a quite common thing. And there are so many books about people's kind of ideological journey. And it does tend to be from left to right. I don't know what that says. You know, it says that perhaps as people get older, the temptations of reactionary thought become more attractive.
What's that saying, Shadi? Do you remember it? Like, if you're not on the left before you're 30, you have no heart or soul, and if you are on the left after you're 30, you have no brain. Isn't that the actual
I think
saying?
it's something like that. I think it's probably more 40, but yeah.
But the that just suggests to me that it's not just the Cold War and neoconservatism, that this is sort of tried and true, that it's not actually all that new, that, like, you know, it's sort of part of growing up.
Yeah.
But finish your thought. But I have some thoughts as you were saying. What else were you going to say on that? Like,
well, I don't think it's as common for people to publicly shift. At least I don't see it all that often. Maybe there's people I'm missing, but I don't get a sense that there's a lot of folks who 6 or 7 years ago were left and now they're right. Although I guess people would say that Matt Taibbi, Glenn Greenwald, and people like that effectively did that, but they don't self-identify as right. They haven't written some book saying, this is why I moved to the right and embraced a new ideology. So I don't think that really counts, because the Cold War examples are mostly of intellectuals who are open about their changes. They said, look, we are leaving the Democratic Party. We are no longer that. We are in the Reagan coalition. We are going to vote for the Republican Party. To my knowledge, the kind of anti-woke leftists are not saying they're going to vote for Trump in 2024 or Ron DeSantis. I wonder, I just think it's a lot more risky now to kind of telegraph an ideological or partisan shift so publicly in front of other people, because we live in a more tribal society where people are self-sorting, and you would basically have to completely shift your acquaintances, your friends, even perhaps your marriage or whatever, because political divides can tear people apart. They can tear relationships apart because the personal is now political and the political is personal and everything is intertwined. So I just think now it would be harder to do like a mixed ideology marriage in Washington, D.C. Like, remember back in the day when there was like James Carville and Mary Matlin, and they would be on opposite sides of like televised debates, like one on the right, one on the left, and somehow they would keep their marriage together. Like, I think that's sort of passé. Like, people aren't looking to Carville and Mary Matlin as examples to emulate anymore.
No, fair. A couple of points. All I'd say about the neoconservative thing, of course, is that I think you're right that the sort of party shift. Now, it's been so long since I've really been swimming in these waters and really sort of, I don't know, trying to excavate that period. But you're right that like Reaganism brought the big party shift, but, the neoconservative stuff happened well before that, right? It was, it was at first a good faith critique, though some would say maybe not good faith critique, but a reaction to the failures of the Great Society and LBJ's domestic, very ambitious, progressive domestic social engineering projects. I mean, I remember, so I got my sort of postgraduate school and maybe serious life start at the American Interest magazine, which was founded by, among other people, Frank Fukuyama. And that split started around the Iraq War at the National Interest, as I recall. And, the lore was that, there was they had these board meetings, these dinners where they'd have, the great and the good gather. And it was the Iraq War that like pushed Frank out of the then neoconservative movement, which was
he wrote a book about it, I think. Yeah,
he did.
Where he was parting ways.
Yeah, but the argument that I remember Frank was using then was neoconservatism was a critique of grand social engineering projects within the United States that these people thought failed. And I think at that point they were still Democrats, right? They were still sort of, in the party. And then he said how absurd it is that neoconservatism today has become a party, a movement that believes that a grand social engineering project in a place like Iraq could succeed. I think that was like the I think to me quite a persuasive zinger of Frank's at the time,
Yeah.
and he was just like, neoconservatism has lost its way because it was a limited conservative critique among liberals of overweening technocratic ambition in domestic politics, and if it can't work there, how could it work elsewhere? But that's just an aside to just point out that this was a group of people that came together around this critique of prevailing things, but didn't really shift parties until like late in Reaganism. And I think you're right. Like Cold War had a lot to do with it. But I think while a lot of people found a home in Reaganism, I think it's also not true that all neoconservatives were Reaganites. I may be wrong about that. Like, I'm not sure.
Not all of them were, but I think that most of them were.
A lot of them sort of came around, and I
Yeah.
mean, it was Reagan's sort of sunny optimism about defeating the Soviet Union and sort of optimism about America that brought a lot of them around.
Yeah.
Because
But it's
they felt that
interesting
was...
now, like a generation later or longer, that you have neoconservatives, some of them at least, shifting back to the Democratic Party.
Yeah, right. That's Trump.
So I guess you can kind of do several shifts over the course of a long life.
Yeah, but what I wanted to ask you, which, we've gotten at this before, I'm struck by, this idea that you feel it's important to have like a coherent identification. I've never felt really drawn to either team. We've talked about this. This is the whole team thing. And you're feeling rejected by your team, I guess, is what it comes down to at this point. And so you're sort of adrift, but it's always struck me, and that's what I guess admired about the early neoconservatives, is that they were put off by orthodoxy, a certain kind of reigning orthodoxy at the time, and they were like, okay, this is bullshit. And they constructed a critique of that orthodoxy and then landed in a different party. But that seems incidental to me. I mean, I think it's I know that it got interpreted in a lot of ways as, oh, these people are all Reaganites and they all became conservatives and neoconservatism. So they shifted from being Democrats to conservative like Republicans. But that's just sort of, that's not the important part to me. It's the important part to me is a group of people, to my taste, were, mostly right about overreach during the Great Society, and were mostly right in pointing out the failures and the blind spots that like technocratic approaches had. And, they just like let the chips fall where they may. The fact that they shifted teams just isn't that interesting to me. And yet like, you seem haunted by this idea of...
I don't know if I'm haunted.
No, but a little bit. I mean, we keep coming back to it, this idea of like belonging to a team. And so, I mean, I mean, obviously you're a close friend of mine. We've been doing this podcast for a while. I know how you think. I also know you're a serious thinker and things like that. But it's always struck me that it was so important to you to like be part of this team. We've gone back and forth of a team, any team. We've gone back and forth on this. I don't think I'm like, like particularly brave or groundbreaking and things like that. But I do think it's important to just sort of have all that seem incidental and just sort of, I don't know, follow the road where it takes you, not worry about whether you're, departing one grouping and joining another one.
Oh, don't
just
worry.
Just sort of calling shots, calling balls and strikes as you see them. You know what I mean? Not necessarily be wrapped up in that stuff. That's all.
Oh, I'm definitely following the path. I don't know where it's going to lead me, but I am apparently following it.
Right.
I hadn't really thought that I could be part of a kind of, group within the Democratic Party today that is challenging the kind of woke orthodoxy, and that we become something comparable to the neoconservative movement. And we stay, at least for the foreseeable future, in the Democratic Party in the hope of changing it from within before giving up and moving to another party. I mean, I don't ever want to do that. I don't plan on it. But again, like, I don't know what's going to happen in 20 years. There could be a massive realignment where just people of color leave the Democratic Party in droves. And then the Republican Party does actually somehow become the party of the multiracial, multi-religious working class. This kind of aspiration that... Go ahead.
But here you are again with sort of like So I remember you I think along with Yasha Monk and others, put together that Harper's letter. I think that was a point, right? An important inflection point. And so that's a team, I guess. But, you and I know Yasha reasonably well. Yasha's got a new book coming out soon, I think, and it's about wokeism and its sort of things. But I like Yasha a lot. I've never thought of myself to be on any sort of team with Yasha, So it's not like me, you, and Yasha. Well, I wouldn't say me and you because I don't really self-identify as a Democrat. But, it's like I wouldn't think it's like, oh, I'm part of something with Shadi and Yasha that is now going to be shifting sides. I mean, that whole framework seems sort of besides the point to me.
It's a bit artificial. But
I like Yasha. I think he's doing good stuff. I think he's smart. I really like talking to him. Don't agree with everything with him on everything, but I always profit from talking to him. Same with you. Like, what's this team business? Like, who cares?
No, but look. But I think the more interesting question is what do we mean by the political labels that we use? To what extent do they hold substantive content? Do they tell us something about the world that we live in or the world that we're about to live in? And I think that tracking how people perceive labels and how they label themselves does tell us something important about the political and ideological landscape. So what does it mean to be a Democrat or a member of the Democratic Party? I would define it as a Democrat is someone who votes for the Democratic Party. Now, one might say that that's a little bit tautological, but it's tautological in the sense that, well, it's obvious too. Like, yeah, that's how it works. Like, what else could it possibly mean? That is what a Democrat is.
But that's why, I'd rather consider myself as a voter with preferences, and both parties sort of annoy me. You know what I mean? And I mean, so I guess I'm an independent, but whatever. What does that mean? My official party affiliation, which is again, I think even in the American context, it's weird because our parties aren't what parties are in parliamentary democracies and things like that. But I believe, honestly, it's been a while. I believe I registered as a Democrat so I can vote in elections that matter in Washington, D.C., because Republicans are never going to win here. So I might as well, register as a Democrat because I live in Washington and to have a marginally more impact on local elections, because voting in Republican primaries is pointless, in this context. But that doesn't determine anything or any kind of loyalty for me. And certainly doesn't determine any kind of identity for me, I guess is what it is. It's like, what does it mean to be a Democrat? I mean, I guess it means, to me, it's purely pejorative.
Wow.
It's purely pejorative in the sense that I would say if someone's like, I'm a Democrat, means that oftentimes you don't know what you think about stuff and you go into some echo chamber that self-identifies as Democrat and then like pick up your cues from that. Or, you reliably read, again, pundits, because that's their role, is to sort of basically spread orthodoxy if they feel that way. And then you read a bunch of those and then just like mouth their ideas over and over. I think that it's just lazy. In our society, the ideal would be that no one identified with any of this bullshit. That basically everyone was like, I don't know, that sounds kind of like crap. And then but that's completely idealized. Obviously, that's not how it works. It's not how societies work. But still, as an ideal, and maybe an ideal I try and practice on my own is like a great deal of skepticism about both sides.
Yeah, but Damir, I think this is maybe somewhat unique to you. I think that you have a profound skepticism, distrust, and dislike for the idea of any group identity. Whether it's a religious group identity or a partisan one, you don't like that. And you don't feel that you need that in your own life. And you've said that oftentimes on the podcast, that you're fine as is. That's also why you don't go to therapy, or so you claim.
No, I have a podcast. We just discussed this.
Exactly.
Who needs therapy? Yeah.
But most people aren't like you. I think that, like, at a fundamental level, most of us desire identity markers. And if you ask people, what are you? They'll give you a number of descriptions. So Democrat is not, well, certainly I'm a small d Democrat, but that's a different thing.
Completely.
But I'm not using member of the Democratic Party or someone who votes for the Democratic Party as my primary identifier. It's a secondary one. But it is one of the ways that I see myself, because partisan identity has become increasingly salient in American politics. So at some level, we're products of our own changing society. In a society where partisan affiliation matters more and more, it's going to matter more and more to me what party I'm in. Because if other people think it's important, we can't just escape that world and say it doesn't matter to us.
Yeah, well, so let me challenge that a little bit, and it's hard for me to do because my family doesn't live in this country, so I have to sort of challenge it anecdotally to you. But even someone who does have family in this country would have to do it anecdotally, because I'm not sure how else you'd do it, because polling wouldn't reveal this.
Oh.
But I can ask you about your parents and your brother. I've spent a lot of time talking to our friend Rachel Rizzo, who, and she's mentioned in the last podcast about how much time she's spent outside of D.C., and how much she's enjoyed being back in Utah during COVID, reconnecting with her, not just her family, but her friends out there. And what was most refreshing to her was in fact that like lack of that politics and this partisan identification and affiliation mattered less. Now, I think, when you go back to, say, Salt Lake City or even our friend Sam Kimbrell, when he'd go back and he was telling us stories of going back to Colorado and interacting with his family and friends back there. Obviously, it'll map onto a party, and you'll get interesting sort of echoes of how the news and all these things filter into people's lives. So, the media plays a role in setting up narratives about Trump and the Republican Party and what Republicans stand for. And on the other side, Fox does this as well, and all the other sort of alternative media sources about what the Democrats are up to and, what their goals are for the country. But you'd get, I think, and I feel like you've said this about your parents too when you talk to them, where they're just like, Shadi, I heard X, Y, and Z about what's going on in the world. Like, is that true? And like they turn to their DC offspring and friends because they're in the shit and they're so deep into it to sort of help clarify it. But it's not like most people even have it. You said Democrat is a secondary identity, but I feel like for a lot of people it's like tertiary or even further down the line. It's basically they're living their lives, they're going to work, they're maybe getting into political arguments over at a happy hour with friends. Some crisis erupts in the world and it breaks through the sort of wall of regular life, and they're sort of paying attention to it, and they're getting barraged about, the political implications of this side and that side. And they're like, wait a second, do Republicans really not want to support Ukraine? That's crazy. We why wouldn't we support Ukraine and that sort of stuff? Because people aren't engaged and aren't following it very much. And so I wonder whether what you're describing is like one of these like very DC things that this sense of belonging to a tribe and party is something that's just very intrinsic here. That you were even talking about like Carville and Madeline and the rest of that. And we here in DC were like, oh, do you remember the time when James Carville and Mary Madeline were dating or like married and like cross party? You go back and say James Carville and Mary Madeline to your parents or to any friends back in Bryn Mawr. They'd be like, what the fuck are you talking about? Am I wrong?
Yeah, sure, but that could apply to any number of things that we talk about here on the podcast that people might not be aware of.
No, I'm just saying that it sounds very overdetermined, this thing that you're saying about belonging to a tribe that is the party. I think you're right that things have gotten polarized, but I wonder if in the real world, as it were, the polarization happens oftentimes by the time we're in election season and people start paying more attention, and the media is just so nuts on both sides and is in high outrage mode, and that then transfers onto people. But you and I have also just one last thought. The other thing is you and I have pondered why given the high stakes in a lot of these hyper polarized elections we haven't had civil war yet. And I think the answer is because it just doesn't matter that much to people. Like Republicans who believe the election was stolen, to Democrats who feel that Trump is the gravest threat, since Adolf Hitler himself. I
don't think that it's they don't care. I think that it takes a lot of effort, energy, attention, time, and even perhaps money to try to get into a civil war. It just really it's a very high threshold. Taking up violence against your fellow citizens or against the state, it's just a very, first of all, why would anyone really want to do that? Just think through let's think through these scenarios for a second. Why would anyone do that in America? So I think
we did it once before. It's possible.
But I don't think that it's that people don't care about issues. It's they don't care enough about issues to wage violence. Those are two different things.
Do you think they care about this partisan identity that much to wage violence over it? That's my case too. It's not about the issues. It's this idea of tribalism. I'm pushing on this. I don't have an answer. I was just, like I said, this is sort of anecdotal from talking to my American friends. I've listed you, Rachel, and Sam, but there are others who, have family in real parts of the country. I just don't have access to real parts of the country like you guys do.
But I guess I'd say this. Yeah.
Go on. That's all. So I'm just pushing on that as a counter. So go on. Yeah.
2 points. one is, and I could be forgetting an example, I don't think that there have been civil wars in advanced, like for a country as prosperous and advanced as America, like it would be completely beyond. It just doesn't happen. Like rich societies don't fight civil wars.
Fine.
Until now. Now, of course,
Fine.
that can change. And I think that's part of it. In a late capitalist society where people have their smartphones and have unlimited choice and can go out and do like pretty much whatever they want, like, would you really want to give that up? Or just you can just hang out in your apartment and just like not care. Like, it just seems like, what would the incentive structure be for people to give up everything they have to fight a civil war? It just doesn't make any logical sense. But putting that aside, I do want to just push back against something you said earlier, that these are DC concerns and considerations. There is a growing body of survey data that suggests that some of this stuff has gone out into the crowd. Mm-hmm. So I just pulled up the numbers right now. There was a 2021 survey of college students. Now, they are college students, so that would suggest a certain level of education. But still, we're not just talking about like DC elites who like read the New York Times or whatever it might be. But according to this survey of college students, it's actually, I mean, I love this stat because it shows a profound disconnect between Republicans and Democrats. So only 5% of Republicans said that they would not work for someone who voted for the opposing presidential candidate. So that means that most Republican college students don't actually see this as a decisive thing. However, 30% of Democrats said they wouldn't work for someone who voted for the opposing presidential candidate. So that's a 25% gap. It gets even crazier when you look at dating. Only 31% of Republicans said that they wouldn't date someone who voted for the other side. But 71% of Democrats said they wouldn't date someone who voted for the other side. Again, a massive disconnect. So if we're looking at the younger generation, progressives and Democrats are really taking this stuff pretty seriously. Partisan identity and affiliation is how they decide sometimes where to work and how they decide who to date. Those are really personal things that we would otherwise consider to be somewhat immune from partisan tribal identity. So my concern is that this stuff is actually becoming more mainstream with people who are people who are well educated on the college level.
So my first thought when you started saying this, the statistic, of course, is that it's college students who are the only class of people that are more useless than us in DC. These are people who actually have no real jobs, have never actually worked a real day in their life. And then you're asking them to opine who they would like to work for. So they've never been in the fucking workforce. They've never actually worked real jobs, except maybe waiting tables. You know what I mean? So that's part of it. I mean, like, I think college is never land, right? And that's part of, I think, the other reason why, you know, that sentence we were kicking around before about under 30 don't have a heart, over 40, as you said, you don't have a brain, is because I think is largely you have to deal with life. You haven't dealt with life in college. There's no life in college. All you're doing is reading books and dating, or rutting, really, not even dating. You know, it's just like, it's just copulation and reading books.
That's not even true, because the younger generation has stopped copulating, like the whole sex recession.
Okay.
So they're not even really doing that. Are they reading books? I don't know.
Okay, so they're just sitting around and being radicalized with dumb ideas without actually reading anything and not even having any fun. So, you know, it's all I'm saying is I now look, I will say that I've said this, I think, before in the podcast. It was when our also good friend and now my colleague Jason Willick, joined the American Interest back then. He came from Stanford, and I had these like long, drawn out arguments with him at the time at the American Interest, where he was just like, "Dude, you don't understand. Campuses are insane, and it's bleeding out of the campuses into the real world." And I was just like, "No, dude, I remember college. I mean, it was a while ago even then for me, but I was like, that was insane too. It was just dumb, loony crap. And professors are also a class of just like useless, irresponsible people. And, it just sort of, it breeds sort of kookiness, but the real world takes its toll. And so I feel like I have had to reassess that and eat some crow on that core belief. I think it has bled out of college campuses, and you're seeing it with a lot of this social justice stuff and wokery and how that's sort of moving into corporations and the legal profession and how it's getting into lawmaking. So I certainly have been too glib about this in the past. I'll take your point that maybe this is a barometer of something, but I'm still struck by this fact. And fine, maybe advanced democracies, advanced societies, wealthy societies can't go to civil war. But it's even what you said, it is the flip side of wealth and the amount of choice of distractions that you have in an advanced society that you don't care about politics that much. It's also that life intervenes, and you have to provide for your family, and you're trying to raise some kids and save money for college and the rest of that. And at that point, politics just matters less. And it's again that it's that's why why in DC it seems so exaggerated, this belonging to a party, where I just I think people have these tribal affiliations and things like that. But I'm again just more and more I'm always struck by how normies interact with my friends who have normie friends and ask very normie questions about politics. Because they're just not that plugged in, it just doesn't matter that much. It's not a secondary identity marker for them. It's way down the line, it seems to me.
Okay. Before I get to my main point, I just want to share a little fun aside. Mm-hmm. So my mom, on our little family group chat, she shared a meme. And the meme is just a kind of like picture of a quote. And it's not clear who this quote is from. It just may be something that people say. It says this: "Hate to break it to you, but when the richest people on earth tell you the real problems are pronouns and wokeness, they are trying to distract you from something." That's what it says. Mm-hmm. So she shared that, and then she asks on our group chat to me, "Is this true, Shadi?" 3 question marks. So clearly she's seeing this meme on Facebook, and she knows that we occasionally talk about wokeness, and now she's curious about this. But I think a lot of this stuff is filtering. Maybe it's not like front of mind. It's not front of mind for my mom, and my mom has often said, "Shadi, all this wokeness stuff, I don't really understand it." But like memes spread. Anyway, sure, just a little data point.
Yeah.
But, you said something important about marriage and children, that life intervenes. And this is also at the heart of the quote we mentioned at the beginning, that you don't stay socialist after 40. What happens after 30 or 40? And it might be 30 because back then people used to have kids earlier, but now maybe we got to push it a decade. So if becoming a little bit more reactionary or a little bit more conservative is a product of getting married and having kids and having responsibilities, then we have an important causal mechanism here. The concern then would be if increasingly young progressives aren't getting married, aren't having families, aren't taking responsibility in this way, they won't necessarily become more reasonable over time, because the mediating factor is not present there. And I haven't read the full article, but it's just something people were sharing. It's a piece from David Leonhardt in the New York Times, where he talks about how millennials, even older millennials, have stayed firmly in the Democratic Party. There doesn't seem to be an obvious shift over time. Millennials are still very progressive, disproportionately so. And anyway, so we'll include a link to that in the show notes. I haven't read the piece, but maybe there's other stuff in there that might be of interest and relevance. But I do wonder if there is something different this time around, where because of these new trends of people not having children, because of climate or whatever other reasons, because they prioritize, scrolling on their smartphones. I read something else today that was sort of getting at this point too, but I can't remember who wrote it, that there is a kind of, anyway, we know what's going on. And if they're not having kids, I think it'll be interesting to test and see whether there's a big divergence among older millennials between the ones who do end up forming families and the ones who stay childless or partnerless.